Pulse Canada is a national industry association that represents growers, processors, and exporters of Canadian pulses. The Canadian Special Crops Association, or CSCA, is a national trade organization representing companies involved in the merchandising of Canadian pulses and special crops, including beans, chickpeas, lentils, peas, canary seed, buckwheat, sunflower seeds, and others. The CEO of the CSCA and Pulse Canada is in his 18th year with Pulse Canada. And Gordon has also worked in the wheat industry and for the Ministry of the Government of Canada and other various duties. I've known Gordon for over 15 years now in this capacity. He's a great leader, a visionary, and I would like to introduce and give a warm welcome to Gordon Bacon of Pulse Canada and CSCA.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tim, for the introduction. I want to say I think it's a real privilege for me to have the opportunity to be the chair of this particular panel, and I'm going to introduce my speakers as they come up. I have 4 panelists, and we have a very interesting presentation. We're really excited about the future of pulses, but I think we just need to remind ourselves that we also have a very proud past. Pulses have been key to the development of civilizations around the world. And because we're here in the Western Hemisphere, I wanted to start with some examples of where pulses have been part of our past. There's 6,000 years ago that we had pulses as part of the foundation crops for the Andean highlands, where the carbohydrate source was potatoes, and scarlet runner beans and lima beans were an important source of protein. For Mesoamerica, corn, squash, and kidney beans were a key part of their diet. And if ever you have the chance to be in Washington, D.C. and go to the Smithsonian museums, there's a terrific display in the museum about the folklore around these crops called the Three Sisters, where the Three Sisters were corn, squash, and beans, and these crops provided an education in nutrition, environmental sustainability, cooperation together. And today, we again are rediscovering some of our proud past. We can go to ancient Egypt, or we could go to the cradle of civilization in the Tigris and Euphrates River in what is now eastern Turkey, and see again thousands of years of history of pulses being part of our past. And appropriately, because we're here at Caesar's Palace with a very sort of ancient Roman theme going on, it's interesting to note that some of the family names of the past of Roman civilization includes Fabius for faba beans, Lentulus for lentils, Piso in peas, and Cicero for chickpeas. Pulses also played an important role in sub-Saharan Africa and cowpeas in West Africa, and today Ethiopia and East Africa, playing an important role in production of beans, not only for domestic but for export use. And we can go to southeastern India and we see the same, and we see the same in China. These crops have always been with us, and what we are doing now is rediscovering some of this tremendous legacy of the importance of playing a role in nutrition that pulses have provided. I wanted to just end this historical lesson by giving a quick reference to Canada. Canada is a relatively new country, but the voyageurs, who were French and English explorers who discovered parts of Canada for the European world at least, were sustained on a diet of pea soup. It was a nutrient-dense crop, high in protein, left people who were paddling the canoes as they explored the rivers and lakes of Canada with something to start the morning on and nourish them throughout the day. So we have a terrific history. The pulses have been part of great civilizations around the world. And today, pulses are consumed in almost every country in the world. And globally, there's more than 70 million tons of pulses produced. What you heard in the presentation from Leo Burnett and our new brand is that pulses are the future of food. We've talked about their health benefit, we've talked about their nutritional benefit, and we've talked about the role that they can play in sustainability. As this panel speaks to you today, I want you to keep in mind that the future of food is in part a slogan that speaks about the great opportunity that we have to make pulses part of the future of food, but it is also a challenge to each and every one of us in the room, because our opportunity and our responsibility is to start building the world where pulses can play that role to be part of the future. For example, we have to do more than simply be more efficient at producing them. We have to have a vision to the future to know how they'll be used, because this goes right back to plant breeders and farmers and food scientists and health professionals and all the way through. We can think more holistically about what the opportunity is for pulses to shape the future and make the future a better place from a health perspective, a better place from a nutritional perspective, and a better place for the health of the planet. So I'm really pleased to be able to chair this session, to get into some discussion, and I hope that I framed it up that all of you will be thinking about the information that these speakers are going to be presenting and asking yourself, how will I play a role in shaping the future of food with pulses? So with that, I would first like to introduce our first speaker. Now, most of the speakers are in the proceedings, in the book, the program for the agenda, for the conference that you've got. But our first speaker, Nirvana Chapman's bio is not in the book, so I'm actually going to provide a little more lengthy introduction for you, Nirvana, simply to make sure that people know who you are. And I've also found that when you hit 55, you have to wear reading glasses. So with that, I will put my glasses on and say Nirvana is the senior consultant with food science at MINTEL. She has specialized in food ingredient science. And prior to her work at MINTEL, Nirvana worked as a product development scientist exploring new technology and ingredients. Nirvana has a Master of Science, Master's in Food Science from Rutgers, and a bachelor's degree in food science and human nutrition from the University of Illinois. And interestingly, Nirvana, I thought it was also interesting to note that you have a culinary certificate in French pastry techniques from the French Pastry School. Nirvana is going to be talking to us about some of the research that MINTEL has done in 10 countries and regions around the world. So Nirvana, I'm going to turn the podium over to you and look forward to your presentation.
All right, thank you guys so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. Today we're going to talk about global opportunities in pulses, and there are many of them. It's a very exciting market to research right now as I was going through the data on this, to see all of the opportunities and the various ways that manufacturers are utilizing pulses to get to their end goals of better health, better wellness, and better environmentally friendly products for the planet. So just by way of agenda, we're going to talk about macro drivers affecting consumption of pulses. We'll touch on some health trends in pulses. And lastly, what the pulse product landscape looks like in various markets. For those of you unfamiliar with MINTEL, we are a market research firm. We specialize in both consumer testing, so we'll take a topic every year and explore that topic in various markets from a consumer perspective. But we also gather products all around the world. So we have a network of shoppers that are constantly going into their stores, seeing new products on the shelf, and pulling that into our database where we analyze these products. So you'll see throughout this presentation rich product examples that we've gathered from all around the world that really display where pulses are shining in various applications. So how did we define pulses here? We have a few categories. First and foremost, beans, and this includes any kind of bean except jelly beans, soybeans, and coffee beans. Also chickpeas, dry peas, cow peas, lentils, pigeon peas, broad beans, and lupin. So first, the macro drivers affecting consumption of pulses. And really the question here is, how have food trends that take into account convenience and fast food and people's need to get food into their stomachs now, how does that meet with pulses, which are traditionally thought of as foods that take a long time to cook? They're part of many ethnic traditional meals. Where do those two converge, and how can the industry, manufacturers in particular, entice consumers with the inherent health benefits of pulses to get them eating more of these foods? And to do this, we have to look at some global trends of how people are eating today. MINTEL does what we call observations. So if we see anything that we consider new and trendy all around the world, we distill it into various trends that are kind of considered wide, broad, worldwide trends that can apply to various markets. So 3 of these that I'll just take you guys through today. The first is called faster hyper. And this is this whole idea that people are so busy, they're busier now than ever before. Their self-perception is that they're very busy. We did a quick consumer test in the US just asking people, how do you feel about your leisure time? And 40% of people said that they don't feel like they have enough leisure time. This is also reflected in Canada. We did the same type of survey. 1 in 4 people said that they consider themselves to be rushed or busy all of the time. So obviously, people are looking for solutions when they eat that are very convenient. Sometimes they're willing to prioritize convenience over health, and this is affecting the way that people eat and the way that manufacturers respond in the marketplace. Also, rebirth of cities. We do know that people are moving to cities, staying in cities more now than ever before. It's actually estimated by the year 2050, 70% of the world's population is going to be living in urban areas. And when people live in urban areas, it just changes and reshapes the way that they think about food, their food community, what inspires them, their relationship to agriculture. So all of that shapes, again, the food choices that they make. And lastly, this whole idea of help me help myself. We know that people have a very hard time resisting unhealthy foods. We did a recent survey in the US, and 40% of people said that they try to stick to a healthy diet, but they are tempted occasionally by unhealthy foods. I find that statistic to be a little bit low. I think maybe the other 60% either don't care when they're tempted by unhealthy foods. I definitely don't think that they're able to eat healthy all the time. But what this really shows is that consumers have a need to better manage their health and to get the tools and experts and communities in place to help them do that. And that's actually being answered through technology. So any of you that bought the Apple Watch that came out recently, now you can track your health, you can track your sleep, you can input all of the foods that you're eating. There's all these tools in place to make it easier to make healthful decisions. And pulses actually fit really well into all 3 of these trends, and I'll take you through why. If we look at how manufacturers are innovating in the marketplace, and again, we look at all of the new product launches that we've taken from all around the world and see how they position themselves, what claims they're making, what ingredients are in those products, we see that 3 trends are really rising to the top. So the whole idea of natural. When we look just over the past 5 years, 25% of all food and drink launches globally made a natural claim or some reference to being natural. And that's up 69% in the past 5 years from previous years. I'm sorry, within that 5-year period, it's up 69%. Convenience as well. So 17% of the products launching now tout that they're convenient solutions. So they can be made in the microwave. They have a squeezy pouch top. Various ways that they convey being convenient for consumers. That also, very similarly to natural, up 67% in the last 5 years. And then lastly, functional. So these are claims like added vitamin D and calcium for healthy bones, or added fiber to keep you fuller longer. They're the type of claims that give you a functional benefit. That's pretty low still. We see 6% of launches talking about a functional claim, but it's up considerably, and it will continue to rise in the future. So how do pulses deliver at this intersection? They're actually doing it pretty beautifully. If we look at how they talk about their health claims and how they've innovated to be quicker solutions for people, a couple of companies stand out as doing a pretty good job. These 4 product examples, the top 2 are from India, and these are just mixes of pulses. Sometimes there's a grain added, and the whole idea is that these can be made on the stovetop or in the microwave relatively quickly to help you eat fast and healthy. Same thing with the bottom, and you see these clever names like Lentilicious. It just gets people really excited and enticed about eating the product. They also have a role in conscious eating. We're seeing a lot of pulses talk about what they do both for health but also for the environment. So this product here, these beluga lentils, they talk about how benefits of pulse crops can really benefit farmers. So whether that's helping depleted soil that's been depleted by agricultural practices, or just helping to restore America's farmland, that's how these products are talking about their advantage both to you personally and to the world that we live in. Also this product here, the 100% falafel product, it's a vegetarian product. It also talks about how it helps reduce the carbon dioxide footprint, especially when you compare that to meat sources of protein. So switching gears, we'll talk about health trends in pulses. So pulses are actually sitting at a very sweet spot right now, especially if we look at all of the claims that all of the food categories are making on their products. Many of them are talking about fiber, especially as we look at products for an aging population. Fiber becomes increasingly important as people age. It's definitely a benefit that they seek out. Protein, I don't think anyone here is ignorant of the fact that protein is just on steroids right now, especially in the Western market. Almost every product, it seems like, is finding a way to talk about their protein, to expound on the benefits of their protein. Protein is extremely hot right now in multiple categories. And it's really done a great job of moving outside of just sports nutrition. You can eat protein at any time of the day, no matter what your life stage is, no matter what your goals are. There are many products that offer that. And then lastly, low glycemic index. This is a claim that hasn't really taken off, especially in more of a Western market atmosphere. We do see it on products. It does relate very well to people that are following a diabetic-friendly diet. But this is a claim that we're keeping our eye on at MINTEL because we think it's going to rise. Right now, about 1 in 12 people are diagnosed with diabetes. That doesn't include the people that are either not diagnosed or are on a track to get diabetes in the future. So this claim will be increasingly important as time goes on. And as you can see, pulses sit right in that center, and it really is an opportunity for them, and manufacturers are seeing that. If we look at some of the claims, just looking at the percent of pulse launches featuring category claims, they do talk about various benefits. One of the biggest ones we see here is suitable for. So when we at MINTEL categorize claims, suitable for can often mean suitable for vegetarians, vegans, maybe it's kosher or halal. There are various topics that it can hit on there. We definitely see pulse products taking advantage of that. Also, ethical and environmental claims. So this can be anything from being good for the environment in terms of how it's grown or being put into an environmentally friendly package. These are all, claims that are on top of consumers' minds, and we see that reflected in the way that manufacturers launch products that include pulses. And just looking at the category growth, again, in the past 5 years, it's been astronomical. So free from, these are claims like gluten-free, GMO-free, allergen-free, lactose-free. Those claims have just exploded. Functional, again, a small group are making these claims right now, but it's very much on the rise. So especially when it comes to pulses, talking about added fiber for a certain digestive benefit, or added protein to help you feel full, or for muscle recovery. We see a lot of those types of claims bubbling up. And various ones, plus, that can mean plus vitamins and minerals, plus X amount of fiber, when they're really putting a designation on the amount of the beneficial ingredient in the product. So we see all of these claims rising, which really just show those are on-trend claims in other categories. So the fact that pulses are taking advantage of that in their manufactured products is a great sign for future growth. Again, they seem to focus on what the product does not contain, and that's a good thing in this scenario. GMO-free, that's a very hot button topic in a lot of industries. Most pulse products are able to make that claim just inherently because there's not a lot of genetically modified testing going on in that region. Looking at low, no reduced fat, so these are all of the inherent benefits that pulses already contain, and they're just putting those claims loud and proud on the front of packaging, and that attracts people to those types of products. Again, vegetarianism, vegetarian positioning, you can see is up by 36%. As the previous speaker talked about, millennials being very interested in a vegetarian or flexitarian lifestyle of eating. We see campaigns like Meatless Mondays. This is a great area where protein pulse products can really shine. So people still want to eat protein at their meals, but they're looking for it from a non-animal source, and this is where pulses are the answer. Again, those claims that it does not contain that, those claims are up significantly in pulses, so it just shows that manufacturers that include pulses in their products, they're very savvy to the claims that are interesting right now to consumers, and they're taking advantage of those in the marketplace. If we look at some of the emerging activity, again, looking at some of these positioning claims, so added fiber is up very significantly. High protein, again, up very significantly. Whole grain, we also see quite frequently with pulse launches. I think that a lot of manufacturers using pulse flours and pulse ingredients, they know that in order to make a complete protein, you often have to pair that, not necessarily in the same meal, but they often do it, with a grain source. So we see a lot of products talking about not only these pulse ingredients that have fiber and protein, but they've also included a whole grain. We see a lot of those medleys and blends in the market. And we see them just added as a benefit to products where you wouldn't necessarily think about seeing it previously. So this first example out of the US, these are just rolls from Alexian Artesian whole grain rolls, they're called, and they contain fava bean flour. The middle product, this is a product that contains sweet bean flour. It's a gluten-free bread out of Turkey. And then Pillsbury gluten-free bread mix. It's a flour blend, and it contains pea fiber. So especially as people are looking at different sources of gluten-free fibers, pulses are definitely an area where they look, where they can get some of the same functional benefits, especially in a baked product, but without the gluten factor, which many consider right now to be something that they want to avoid for various reasons. They can also be seen in bakery as an excuse to indulge. So a lot of products, when they talk about their inherent health benefits, they may still be high in calories or still high in fat, but they're still able to kind of sit on the halo of health that their ingredients provide, and pulses are providing that in a lot of baked goods. So you can see this first product. These are vinegar-seasoned sprouted lentils. It's a snack. They're talking about, you can still indulge in this product. It's still good for you because it contains lentils. The Brazilian barbecued crispy broad beans, so you're not eating chips even though you're still eating fried beans. They're a little bit more healthful for you. They can be a little bit more satiating. The Weight Watchers brownie bliss bars with pea flour added to them, pea fiber. So it really gives you that extra reason to say, I can have one more of these, or these aren't that bad for me. They give this halo of health to the product. They also deliver a lot of substance to snacks and kind of give that feeling of guilt-free snacking. So these first chickpea chips, you feel just a little bit less guilty, again, when you're eating products that aren't potato chips or corn chips or something that consumers in their mind go towards as unhealthy. These inclusions of pulses help to reframe the conversation around snacks. And they're doing a great job of it. They're very much positioned as healthy. They're hitting on all the right claims that consumers are seeking. So they're helping consumers to indulge in a new way. We also see pea protein, very much a rising star in the pulse market in terms of how manufacturers incorporate protein. So pea protein, it's pretty advantageous from an application standpoint. It's relatively inexpensive. It doesn't come with a lot of flavor or odor baggage, so it's very easy, relatively easy, I should say, to incorporate into various applications. And we definitely see that happening. You can see all these different categories where pea flour and pea protein specifically have been added. So pet food, fish, meat, and egg products that can kind of be added to boost the amount of protein already in the product. Bakery, snacks, beverages, side dishes, you name it, it seems like somebody's decided that they can find a way for pea protein to be included. If we look at the percent change, so where are we really seeing it? Again, 151% increase in the last 5 years of pea protein use in snacks, so that's really high. Beverages, 133% increase. So again, this doesn't mean that this is the highest use category all the time, but that we see a lot of growth in those categories. You can see too with sauces and seasonings, 200% increase in the amount of sauces and seasonings products coming out that have included pea protein in the application in the last 5 years. So we do see it a lot in products that do talk about being vegetarian or vegan. So it's very much being used as a star protein. So these jalapeno chips, including pea protein, everyday value veggie dogs. This is a product from Whole Foods Market touting its pea protein. And then all these beverage mixes. We do see a lot of beverage mixes, both in the sports nutrition category and just in the general nutrition category, using vegetarian sources of protein and pea protein being one of the top choices. Also, again, being added to fish and meat products. So the first product, this is a pet food. It's blending already meat products, so it's not necessarily vegetarian, but it adds a cheaper source of pea protein into the product to really boost up those numbers of protein in the product. Ready meals, so this meatball and potato wedges product, adding pea protein, just to, again, up those numbers. And the last product, minced beef to cook. This is an area where you wouldn't even expect to find pea protein, but it often is slipped in, again, as a lower cost, fairly low taste, low odor way of bumping up protein numbers and getting those products in the hands of consumers that are seeking that protein. One huge example, so Cheerios Protein launched last year. So this is a product that touts 11 grams of protein, 7 grams without milk, but the protein sources in the product come from soy and lentils as protein sources. So again, very large name manufacturers realizing that pea protein is a great way to get protein into a product without really manipulating the current taste and odor that people associate with their favorite foods. Pulses with fiber also build on the trend for satiety. So we know that consumers are seeking satiety. We know that for manufacturers, it's a very difficult claim to make. You have to do a lot of clinical testing if you really want to say this product keeps you fuller longer, especially in a market like the U.S. We do see consumers seeking out a mix of protein and fiber or high fiber foods to help them feel fuller longer, because inherently, in their minds, they associate it with a slower digested food. And we see manufacturers, again, taking advantage of that. So ranch bean and rice chips, not something we would expect to see a high fiber claim, but they do make that claim. Red lentil rotini, so this is a pasta that gives you a boost of fiber towards your regular consumption of pasta, where you may not be getting a lot of fiber in regular pasta. Oatmeal breakfast cereal, Cocoa Puffs, again, with that added fiber claim, really show that this can be a product that you can indulge in, and it has a functional health benefit that's an inherent part of the ingredients. We also see, again, it's a very small claim right now, but when manufacturers talk about low glycemic index, we really see that as an opportunity, especially for those interested in the diabetic market and how diabetics are going to be shopping, knowing that they're a growing consumer base globally. These claims are going to become more important in years to come, and we already see products with pulses in the ingredient statement that are talking about, this is going to affect your blood sugar response in a positive way. Looking at the pulse product landscape, so across various markets, where are we seeing a lot of activity and growth in pulses? So just looking globally, overall pulse product numbers are very much up. We saw a pretty big change from 2012 to 2013, and products still appear to be on the rise. So far, 2015 looks to be tracking in the same upward direction for products that include pulses in their products. I'm sorry, manufacturers who include pulses in their products. And snacks seem to be a very key area of innovation. You can see how snacks have just really pulled away from all of the other categories that MINTEL analyzes in terms of where pulses are being included. So this, again, is a very hot market for pulses. It's very much a growing market for pulses. But a lot of the areas also seem up. So, meals and meal centers, sauces and seasonings, these are all areas that are on the rise in terms of including pulses. Again, they fulfill a variety of usage occasions. So when you add pulses into the product, it can be for everyday eating, it can be for snacking, but we see it in traditional snacks. So this chickpea product here on the left here, the pulses vanilla chocolate chip protein snack. So again, a bar including pulses, and then there's lentil chips for light snacking. So again, no shortage of products that already contain some of these pulse ingredients, and we know that that's going to continue to rise. If we look at the types of pulses that are being selected, most of them do appear to be flat, but we are seeing growth in 3 significant areas. So chickpeas, lentils, and dry peas have all 3 experienced some pretty heavy growth numbers in terms of what manufacturers are seeking as kind of their way into the pulse ingredient landscape. If we look across various regions, again, we're seeing a lot of growth in Asia Pacific, Europe, and North America. It's a little less so in the Middle East and Africa and Latin America. And when we look more strategically, you'll see on the next slide, India is really pulling away from the rest of Asia as a growing market for pulse manufactured snacks and other products. You can see here, this chart shows just how much dramatic change India has experienced in terms of manufactured products that include pulses in the last 5 years. As I mentioned, 10% of the activity in India has come from these companies, Pepsi, Haldiram, Mayas, MTR Foods, and Future Groups. And snacks compose half of all pulse activity in India. So there's huge activity going on in pulses in snacks in India. And you can see the various types of ingredients that are being used. It's very heavy on chickpeas, lentils, a little less so on peas and pigeon peas. And beans and cowpeas are not quite making the mark right there in India yet. But again, I say yet because as manufacturers look to differentiate in these markets that are getting more saturated, they're going to look for more exotic, different sources of pulse additions to their foods. We definitely see it a lot more fragmented across the U.S. 13% of the activity does come from Aldi, Kroger, so these are more of your private label brands that are putting pulse products on shelf. I'm going to butcher this name, Kinnikinnick Foods, Meijer, and Wegmans. And the categories where we're seeing it launch are very much meals and meal centers, fruit and vegetables, savory spreads, and again, snacks. And we can see here, so chickpeas, lentils, and peas, very much the ingredients of choice when manufacturers are looking at what sources can they use for pulse additions. Switching gears to China, so we know that beans compose a majority of pulse activity in China, and it's very fragmented in China. The top 10 companies only compose about 6% of all pulse launches. So this means there's a lot of little players, which is great. It just means that the opportunity is being recognized by many different manufacturers, and they're all kind of rushing into the market. We know that a quarter of activity is in sauces and seasonings. There's a lot of bean-based sauces and, as part of many Asian cuisines, and that activity has not slowed down at all. 23% is in snacks, so that's pretty encouraging as well. Looking at Canada, 22% of the activity does come from George Weston, Walmart, Summer Fresh Salads, La Mer Pool, and Safeway. And then the top categories, again, dips, vegetables, and prepared meals. So it is a little bit more diverse in Canada in terms of where beans are being added. It's a lot of hummus and bean-based dips are really growing in that category. So it's pretty exciting to watch. And again, chickpeas, lentils, peas, you see a lot of the same players in terms of which top ingredients manufacturers seek out when they're going to make a pulse addition. There's not huge variance across the markets. Looking at the Middle East and Africa, we see a lot of featured chickpea launches. And again, looking at the top 23% of activity, that's where we see manufacturers like Woolworths, Pick and Pay, Strauss Group, ShopRite, Gulf Food Industries. So again, a little bit less fragmented than some of the other markets that we see. And chickpeas, again, lentils and peas, really responsible for a lot of the addition of pulses into manufactured goods. If we look at Spain, 20% of the activity coming from these top manufacturers, and then again, almost a third of the activity is in meals and meal centers, and then 24% in fruit and vegetables. So this means, a lot more launches of canned beans, canned lentils, packaged or prepackaged foods that are, maybe more convenient to eat, but still just feature the lentil product or the chickpea product or the pea product in the pouch or the can. Australia sees a lot of activity across 15 categories. So again, a very few manufacturers responsible for a pretty large percentage of who's manufacturing the products, but a little bit more activity in terms of where they're manufacturing. So again, fruit and vegetables, meals and meal centers, savory spreads, soup, seeing a lot of increased activity. And again, the same players, lentils, chickpeas, and peas pop up again, but there is a little bit more diversity in the Canadian market. You can see beans are up, pigeon peas being used, lupin being used. Not as much increase in activity, but I do think that this is an area, and MINTEL, keeps our eye on the types of broad choices that manufacturers have and when they start to make some of these more niche decisions of what pulse ingredient they'll use. Looking at turkey food launches, again, not a huge surprise, a huge percentage use chickpeas. 33% of the activity is from Unilever, Halabai, Migros, Carrefour, and that UCG company. Fruit and vegetables accounting for 29% of activity and snacks for 22%. So again, you can just see the various applications where manufacturers have decided to invest in terms of how they're going to bring pulses to the public. Looking at Egypt, again, same profile. We do see more beans used in this market, chickpeas and lentils, 31% of the activity coming from these top companies. And then 68% of the activity is in fruit and vegetables, which is really high when we look across other markets. Argentina, again, same top players, not a huge surprise here. It's a very fragmented market, more so than China, and a lot of activity in fruits and vegetables. So just looking at salty snacks, which is where we see a lot of activity, and especially in Western markets, you can look at the types of the volume of consumption versus how the market is projected to increase, and see where some of these players, in terms of countries, sit on this map here. And you can see the U.S. and China, just very big market, projected growth in that market to be pretty to increase over the next few years. So those are markets where we keep our eye on how are these manufacturers going to make new and exciting choices of ingredients that they use, and knowing that pulses sit in that sweet spot, how will they use these products? Looking at prepared meal centers, kind of the same idea. It's interesting the UK is kind of a small market, but a lot of people do consume those products. So again, how are manufacturers going to get savvy about including pulse ingredients into some of these meal categories in these various markets will be very interesting to watch. So again, just some of the key takeaways. We know that pulses are growing beyond traditional preparations. They're being really utilizing their inherent health benefits. We know markets such as India, where it's a little less developed in terms of breadth of category, they can look to markets like the US and the UK and Canada in terms of how have those markets innovated with convenient meal solutions. We know that sustained energy and the interest in protein and fiber is going to continue to be a key benefit that consumers seek, especially in these rapidly changing markets and growing markets. And lastly, we know that pulses are very uniquely positioned as a powerful plant-based protein, and this can be leveraged in so many very interesting ways, whether it be for personal health or global health. Thank you for your time today.
So as Dr. John Sievenpiper is making his way to the stage, I'll just do a brief introduction to him. Nirvana, thank you very much. We're going to have questions after all panelists have spoken, and MINTEL was sort of our anchor for our presentation, a great presentation on the tremendous increase in food products. Part of our brand promise is taking a look at the health benefits that pulses can provide. So I'm pleased to introduce Dr. John Sievenpiper, who received his MD from St. Matthew's School of Medicine and did his residency training in medical biochemistry at McMaster University. He is with the University of Toronto at the Department of Nutritional Sciences, and he will be talking to us today about pulses in health, what the evidence says, and how pulses can play a role in addressing some of the global health challenges that we have. Dr. Sievenpiper.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to come and share some of our data. I think this talk I'm going to deliver is particularly appropriate this time in the program because it's been so nicely set up. The President talked about the triple threat of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, and we've had some excellent talks on the need really, I think, to promote and brand pulses better, really as a means, I think, of increasing market share. But I would submit to you also as a public health necessity to address this triple threat and this epidemic we see now of obesity, diabetes, and the consequence of that, cardiovascular disease. So with that, I'll get started. So the objectives for my talk really are summed up here. It's really, I want you to appreciate this triple threat of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, and that flows from it. Recognize, I think, the tremendous opportunity for pulses in this crisis. And if I go back to my title, which was questioning what is the evidence, I think really ask ourselves, what is the evidence? And I think we have to ask ourselves that because as we move towards evidence-based systems of nutrition and medicine for making our clinical decision-making and our public health decision-making, we need to be able to show the evidence. So I think that pulses are generally considered healthy, but now the burden of proof is greater, the standard of evidence that's required, so we really have to ask what is the evidence. So then discuss with that then the short-term effects on satiety, so feeling fuller longer and achieving healthier blood sugar levels, and then looking at the evidence to see does that actually matter? Does that manifest as improvements in our risk factors for diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, and so on, or I should say coronary heart disease and stroke and so on. And then finally, with that, I guess appreciate where the state of the art or state of the evidence is. So what are the strengths and limitations, and can we move forward from this as it stands? Do we need to do more work? So with that, I'm going to give you a bit of a background on the problem, which has been nicely set up. Really, obesity and diabetes represent, and cardiovascular disease as a consequence of that, pardon me, it's going through already, one of the most important unmet prevention and treatment challenges. And if you look here, this is the example in the United States, and the darker the color gets, the greater the rise in diabetes. And this is just showing over the last 20 years what's happened in the United States. So what you can appreciate is there's been a threefold increase in the number of cases of diabetes in the United States in the last 20 years. So this is a true epidemic. It's now about 10%, 9 to 10% of the population that have it. But this is not an epidemic that's restricted to the West, if you like, to North America, the US and Canada. In fact, it is a global epidemic. It is a pandemic. And if we look here from the International Diabetes Federation, what you can see is that most cases of diabetes actually reside in the developing world now. It's the Middle East and North Africa, it's Southeast Asia, it's South Asia. And it's these areas which are contributing the greatest amounts. And if we look and project it out over the next 20 years, What we're confronted with in the developing world is much what I showed you very quickly as it ran through in North America. We're confronted with a true epidemic, about a 55% increase in new cases of diabetes. And what flows from that, because diabetes is arguably one of the most important risk factors for cardiovascular disease, is cardiovascular disease. That's your heart disease and stroke. The things that we care about, don't want to die from, and don't want to be in hospital for. So these flow directly from diabetes, and what you can see here, the areas where there's greatest concern, which are the darker areas, the orange and the red, again, it's North Africa, Middle East, there's some South Asia, Southeast Asia. These are big areas. And Europe, as it relates to Russia and Eastern Europe in particular as well. So these are important markets where I think pulses can have a lot of potential. So what is the opportunity for pulses? Well, I think actually it's a particularly good one, because in the diabetes world, we're actually confronted with a bit of an issue with the medications that we have. The available medications, so despite armories of medications and prevention strategies, we really haven't been able to get a handle on it. And the medications that we do have failed to deliver the anticipated cardiovascular benefit that we would hoped, certainly as a clinician, that we would see. And this really comes from three landmark trials and a systematic review and meta-analysis in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is our pinnacle of scientific publishing in the clinical realm, which showed that the new drugs that we have and new targets for blood sugar control with these drugs have failed to show an improvement in cardiovascular disease, and in some cases maybe even increase it in the case of certain drugs such as the glitazone drugs. So we have this opportunity, I think, for nutrition, putting nutrition back on the map. And first and foremost, I think, in nutrition, one of the greatest things that we have in our armory, if you like, our toolkit in nutrition are dietary pulses as really a tremendous food. So it was discovered early on by my mentor, David Jenkins, who invented the glycemic index in the late 70s and early 1980s, that dietary pulses actually are digested much more slowly than our other carbohydrates. So if you look here on the top left, you can see lentils and bread, and that just shows the digestion being much slower, which is the lower curve with the lentils. And that this manifests in a lower blood sugar response. So all carbohydrate foods that you consume will raise your blood sugar. Some raise it more, some raise it less. And what you can see here is compared to a slice of white bread, which is the tall, peaking, and arching blood sugar curve. If you look at the lower blunted one, that's from lentils. So this actually manifests in achieving a healthier blood sugar level after a meal. And if you compare it with other foods, and that's down in the far corner with beans and peas versus other carbohydrates, you can see the lowest curve being that for one of the pulses, it's much, much lower. The issue is that confronts clinicians, policymakers, regulators is, does this matter? I think pulses are generally considered as healthy. We know they have a low glycemic index, and we saw a very nice slide on that from the last speaker. They're high in amylose starch, high in resistant starch, viscous sticky fibers, which are particularly important, vegetable protein, which was highlighted very nicely in the last talk, and a number of anti-nutrients. And we believe that this wonderful complex plant matrix actually may mean something. And when we look at the acute studies, we see this decrease in digestion, as I showed you, and absorption, and decrease in blood sugar response. But the question remains, does this matter over the long term? Do we actually see improvements in blood sugar levels, blood pressure levels, lipid levels, those important driving risk factors for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, over the long term? So what have the dietary guidelines told us? Well, the dietary guidelines to this point, and this really represents the culmination of the evidence, because these guidelines committees, and I'm on a couple of these committees myself for Canada and Europe, are charged with actually pooling these data together and trying to make sense of it. Traditionally, they haven't asked the question about pulses, which I think has been part of the problem, and so we have not seen pulses in these guidelines. Where we do, it's to increase fiber, potentially vegetable protein, but not really the role of pulses as a food in improving diabetes risk factors, cardiovascular risk factors. That has recently changed, and it's changed based on some of the data that I'm going to share with you for the diabetes guidelines, where we asked the question and we were able to evaluate the evidence and make a recommendation, which is for the CDA, the Canadian Diabetes Association guidelines, and the Americans have too, for the role of pulses alone or as part of healthy dietary patterns like a vegetarian dietary pattern, a Mediterranean dietary pattern, and so on, in improving blood sugar control. If we look at cardiovascular disease guidelines, and these represent the American, Canadian, and European guidelines, as did the last slide for diabetes, we see much of the same, but really pulses have not been identified in and of themselves as being important. Alone, it's more their role insofar as they're part of a healthy dietary pattern. So I think there's a great opportunity to get pulses into these guidelines. And if we look at dietary pulses and obesity guidelines, there's no mention either alone or as part of dietary patterns in these guidelines. And if we look at health claims, what we see is that none are permitted at the moment in Canada, the United States, that's through the FDA, or in Europe. So I think that there's a great opportunity to look at the evidence and be able to guide these different committees. So how can we improve on that data? And that's really the question. What is the evidence? How can we ask that question and get a better answer? So what we've done is a series of systematic reviews and meta-analyses that were funded. This is really taking a big data, metadata approach to the available evidence, synthesizing it, mapping it, like identifying it, mapping it, pooling it, and synthesizing it so that we can then make it available to guidelines committees so that they can make some recommendations. So when we do that, we've done a couple of research programs, one looking at those short-term effects that I want you to appreciate, feeling fuller longer, achieving healthier blood sugar levels, and the other, which is focused then looking on, does it really matter over the long term? Do we actually get a long-term improvement in overall blood sugar control, or a long-term improvement in overall blood cholesterol and lipid control, and in blood pressure control, and in body weight control, which is particularly important. So if we look at the first series of evidence and we look at the effect on our postprandial, or that's after meal blood sugar levels, some of this work was done at the University of Toronto. We also had collaborators from Harvard and a number of other organizations. I'm going to show you some of the data, and I'm not trying to give you a clinical epidemiology or biostatistics lesson here. I just want to impress you with the amount of data that's there and some of the issues and enormity of the issues in terms of pooling and putting together. But this colleague is doing a postdoctoral fellowship with us, Livia. She screened almost 1,000 papers which have looked at this question, and she identified 38 that have looked at it in terms of blood sugar control. And what she showed is you can look at, I just skipped by lentils, but for beans here, what you can see is that the benefit is on the left, harm is on the right. So you see a clear benefit of beans, and it's true for beans, peas, chickpeas, and lentils when we look across them. Those are all the individual study estimates. The diamond at the bottom is the one you care about. If it's clear of the line, as you can see it there on the left, that means there's benefit. And we see that all of these can reduce your blood sugar level by about 50% after a meal. So I skipped over lentils. These are beans. Sorry, I skipped over peas, I guess. Those are beans, lentils, and here we have split peas, all showing benefit after the consumption of a meal. Now, what about feeling fuller longer, which I think is very important to consumers, and I think it's an important question. Well, if we look at that, this was done by a very capable and bright young student who's gone off to medical school, but before she did, we were able to get some really great work from her. She published this in the Journal of Obesity, and she screened almost 2,000 papers just to show you how much work has been done in the area, and found 10 that met our criteria for high-quality evidence. The highest quality evidence, really, then, to inform public health policy, clinical practice guidelines, and also policymakers' evidence requirements. And what she found here is in terms of a satiety index, this is feeling fuller longer. Now the benefit is on the right side. You can see when you look across the studies that have looked at this question carefully in a controlled, experimental way in humans, you do see that people report feeling fuller longer. And we look at their actual intake at another meal. Now the benefit's on the other side. I don't mean to confuse you. What you can actually see is people do consume less calories than at the second meal. It wasn't significant, but the tendency certainly was that beans, peas, chickpeas, and lentils may lead to the satiety that people are feeling may lead to less consumption. Now the question is, what about over the long term? Does this actually matter? Do we see the benefits? And this is really where I think the rubber hits the road for a lot of evidence-based guidelines committees and policymakers. So we look at blood sugar. We published this in the journal Diabetologia back in 2009. And I show you the cover of the journal because this cover is never, ever, this journal has never, ever had nutrition on the cover. Usually it's some molecule or enzyme or something very sciencey. And because of the impact of this article, they asked us to choose the cover for a very prestigious, extremely prestigious journal in the area of diabetes. So we picked Annabelle Carracci's Renaissance painting on the bean eater, and so that adorned the cover of Diabetologia, which was a landmark in and of itself, not just the study I'm going to show you. But we published this in Diabetologia, and I led this work as part of my postdoctoral fellowship. I screened over 1,000 papers. We looked at a number that looked at pulses alone as part of low glycemic index interventions, and we had a discussion of the role there, and also of high fiber interventions, because a lot of people use them to increase fiber. And we found in each case, as we saw an improvement in blood sugar control. So this represents, again, the totality of the evidence pooled here for you in front of you, just to show you how much work has been done. And what you can see is the diamond at the very bottom shows a benefit. So that's on the side of benefit for blood sugar control and for insulin control, which is a concern in insulin resistance. And if we look at as part of low glycemic index diet, something that was touched on in the last talk, again, you see an improvement in overall blood sugar control. And I want to state that this effect that we see for blood sugar control is the lower limit of what you would expect with a drug. This is a drug-like effect. It meets the requirements of the FDA for new drug development in terms of the reduction in hemoglobin A1C, which is the marker that we use in drug development for blood sugar control. And it's at the level that you would see with other oral agents that we currently prescribe for people with diabetes, so a very clinically meaningful effect. And for high-fiber diets, again, we saw an improvement in blood sugar. Now, what about lipids and one of the most important cardiovascular risk factors? Well, this was done by Vanessa Ha, who's now doing a Ph.D. She published this in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. This is a very prestigious general medical journal published in Canada, but has worldwide readership and is considered very, very high quality place to publish one's work, very high impact. She screened over 3,000 papers, so again, a large body of work, and she found a number of studies looking at important cardiovascular lipid targets, the ones that we target actually with our drugs. So if we target these with pulses, what do we find? And if we look at LDL cholesterol, and this is the most important target we have, it's used for the entry criteria for the trials that we have. It's used as targets for treatment in trials where we've seen cardiovascular benefit. We do see an improvement in LDL cholesterol. And this improvement, although small at about 5 to 7%, certainly when put together with a portfolio of other cholesterol-lowering foods, is similar to that you would expect to see with drugs. Now, what about blood pressure? When we looked at blood pressure, this was done by Jay, who's going to be going off to med school this year, but again, we were able to get his great and very diligent services before he did that. He looked at blood pressure. He screened almost 300 papers, just to show you again, there's a lot of papers out there, and he found a number of trials that looked at systolic, diastolic, and mean arterial pressure. So in all of these cases, I'm going to show you this is systolic, this is diastolic, and mean arterial pressure. There was a benefit for dietary pulses on blood pressure. So again, improving blood pressure control, which then one could extrapolate to mean potentially reduction in high blood pressure levels or an incident hypertension. And finally, what about body weight? And I think that this is a tremendously big area where consumers are very interested because everyone wants the quick fix in terms of a diet. Well, when we looked here, this was done by Shauna, who's now doing a Master of Science, and she did this work, and we hope to publish it in a very high-profile journal. She looked at 19 trials, having screened over 300. What she found here is even matching for calories, when you hold the calories the same between a control diet and that one that's enriched with pulses, and if you look at people where the intervention is to reduce calories or but matching that reduction in calories or hold the calories one needs to maintain their body weight equal, we see a reduction in body weight, which is pretty tremendous. This doesn't necessarily mean that a calorie is not a calorie. I think it may mean that a calorie labeled on dietary pulses is not a calorie metabolized, because we know the complex cell walls and the resistant starch and the fiber mean that that energy is less accessible and potentially of great benefit for people that want to achieve and maintain a healthy body weight. So what are our conclusions? Well, I think we have a good body of evidence, and we have strong evidence, and looking at it, again, applying the best tools that we have, the big data, metadata tools, to mitigate bias and to really arrive at, what does the best evidence tell us by doing a systematic review and meta-analysis of these high-quality trials. What we find is that there are clinically meaningful improvements in blood sugar control that is comparable to that seen with medications, that the pulses also benefit body weight, blood lipid control, and blood pressure control. There are very few, if no drugs, that can do all of these things. It's like a poly pill, if you like, in one food. Potentially, it can have that benefit across those risk factors. Traditional dietary patterns rich in dietary pulses, and I think this may be very relevant for the developing world where we see this increase coming. It's coming in the developing world, may represent an important part of the solution for addressing the epidemics of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. That triple threat that was raised earlier and that I hope I've impressed upon you is one that's really potentially poised to defund and bankrupt public health care systems. And then finally to confirm these results with more research is really needed. So this is a call to you, the community. I think we have to promote and brand pulses, but I think we also have to improve the research base that we have so we can impress policymakers, impress public health professionals, impress clinical practice guidelines committees, physicians like myself, and other allied health professionals of the benefits. So we need more long-term trials where we put pulses together in healthy dietary patterns and show benefit on meaningful clinical outcomes. With that, I thank you for your time.
That was fantastic. Fantastic presentation, and it shows where we're at and the opportunity and the obligation we have to continue to build that health component of our brand. So I'm pleased now to introduce our next speaker. By the way, just before I do that, I wanted to say, John, I really appreciated the comment about sort of reinforcing how traditional diets could play an important role. And I think that when Colleen spoke to us, she talked about reignite the passion about pulses. So for many parts of the world where pulses have been a traditional part of the diet, we need to ensure that people understand why. We go back to the analogy of the three sisters, and that people in the past had the right idea, and we just have to make sure that people of the present and future understand some of those learnings from the past. So, tremendous opportunity. We see some health opportunities, we see some trends in terms of product launches. And so I know that somebody like Erika Smith, who I'm going to introduce, will be watching a lot of the medical research that has gone on, a lot of the analytical work and the progress on things like health claims. So our next speaker is coming to us from the food industry. Erika Smith is the technology director with the long-term research and development group at General Mills. You can read more of her bio in your program on page 11. But Erika has 21 years of experience as a product developer. She has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Illinois and her Master's and Ph.D. from Cornell University. And I think it's a tremendous progression now to take a look at inclusion of food in, inclusion of pulses in a range of foods. And the title of Erika's presentation is Formulating with Pulse Ingredients, the Opportunities and Challenges. So Erika, please join us on stage.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here, and I'd like to thank the Global Pulse Confederation for inviting me here, and I'm really happy to represent my company, General Mills. Before I begin, I just wanted to give a tribute to Elvis, who was at the party last night. I thought that was a great party, so thanks to Sissels for such a great event. Had a great time. Had to incorporate that in my talk. Okay, what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to first of all give you a brief overview of General Mills because many of you may not know our company, but I hope you will recognize many of our brands because we are an international food company. I'm going to talk to you about why we feel pulses are strategic, not only for General Mills, but for the future and the future of food. I'm going to talk about how we use pulses today as a company, what are the opportunities for pulses and pulse ingredients, and then some of the technical challenges that we encounter as we try to formulate with them, and then close with some closing remarks. First of all, General Mills is an international company, and we are one of the largest global food companies in the world. We market our products in more than 100 countries on 6 continents. And basically, we make convenient packaged foods, a very wide variety, a very diverse product line, and I'll show you some of our brands and some of the categories that we play in. We have 43,000 employees, and actually more outside the United States than inside at this time. We are located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's our world headquarters. And our fiscal net sales is about $18 billion. So we have a strong heritage of innovation and brand building at General Mills, and we're about 150 years old as a company. We started as a flour milling company, so very much a commodity-oriented company, and it was started in Minneapolis because you may know the Mississippi River flows through Minneapolis, and there happens to be, in the only area of the Mississippi, natural waterfalls there. And so the founders of General Mills harnessed the power of the waterfalls to grind the wheat into flour. And so not only General Mills, but also Pillsbury established companies there. And actually today General Mills does own Pillsbury, but they were very much competitors back then, 150 years ago. But the first product where General Mills kind of moved from a commodity to more of a value-added ingredient company, or sorry, packaged food company, was with the invention of Betty Crocker cake mix, which was one of the first products to be developed by General Mills. So that was kind of a way that we brought value to the consumer and more convenience. Some of the other products that we're known for are extruded cereals, breakfast cereals. So you can see Wheaties is a brand there that is known to many people around the world. And also Cheery Oats was a product that was founded early on in our history and is made from oats. So oats and wheat are the basis for our company and many of our products. And in more recent years, we have aligned with Nestle in our cereal partners worldwide partnership outside the United States. We manufacture cereal and it's branded under the Nestle brand name. We also have the Green Giant brand, which was early on founded in Le Sueur, Minnesota, and that's indicated on this timeline. And then we also own the worldwide name and product line for Yoplait, and now we're a majority owner in Yoplait worldwide, which is a relatively recent development. Yoki is a company that we recently acquired in Brazil, and our latest acquisition is Annie's, which is a product line based on natural and organic food products. So this slide shows what our global portfolio looks like. So if you scan the list here, hopefully you'll recognize some of our brands, no matter what country you happen to be from. And we operate in 4 major platforms: extruded cereal, bar and grain snacks, baked goods, meals, and dairy. So you can see some of our product lines there. So a very diverse product line. We span pretty much every aisle of the grocery store. U.S. retail is about $11 billion. Our bakeries and food service business is about $2 billion, and then international is about $5 billion. When you look at how our platforms are distributed in terms of our net sales, ready-to-eat cereal leads the pack, and that's really our history. Our history is in extruded grains to make breakfast cereal. Right behind that, though, is snack bars. We invented the snack bar category in the United States with the Nature Valley brand of snack bars. Convenient meals is another big area where we play. I mentioned yogurt, Yoplait. Outside the United States, we own the Häagen-Dazs brand. Inside, that's owned by another company, but outside, that's a very strong brand for us. And then I mentioned our portfolio in the bakery aisle, as well as a refrigerated and frozen dough, and then vegetables with our Green Giant brand. So what is our strategy for growth? Well, first and foremost, our mission is nourishing lives, and we take that very seriously, from the products that we make that are nutritious to actually our philanthropic mission, which is we fund a lot of global philanthropy that we're very proud of. Our strategy is consumer first. And so by that we mean is that we try very, very hard to understand what our consumers want and need, and then do that better than anybody else, and then make those products for them. And we believe that if we do that well, that we'll succeed and grow as a company. We have 5 growth accelerators that revolve around consumer first, and that is brand renovation. So even though Cheerios might have been invented in the 40s, we're still improving on Cheerios. And Nirvana mentioned, for example, the high-protein Cheerios that we recently launched. So we do a lot of our activity in the food science world, even on improving our existing brands. Also, innovation is very important for our company. Consumers like new food products, so we work hard trying to provide that. We focus a lot on holistic margin management, which that's an acronym for us that we called HMM, and that's just basically what any good company does by taking unneeded cost out of the system, whether it's ingredients or packaging or how we make our products. Customer partnership is very important. Walmart is a very important customer for us, as is Costco, Trader Joe's, that sort of thing. So in addition to consumers, we partner heavily with customers. And then we're very focused on international expansion, and our international platform is growing at the fastest rate right now. I'm not going to go into this slide in too much detail, but I always, when I give presentations, even within my company, we have a lot of food scientists there and marketing people, I always start with a Pulse 101, because I think a lot of people don't understand what pulses are, and I know that that's going to be a big mission of the Global Pulse Confederation. But I think that's one of the challenges also with consumers. But I will say, no matter what ingredient you use, including pulses, as long as the product tastes good, I don't think the consumer is really going to matter or be concerned too much about what a pulse is. It has to taste good first. We think pulses are strategic and have strategic importance for us, and I'm just going to go into basically 5 reasons why. First of all, they're nutritious, 25% protein, about 17% or more fiber, whole source of protein and fiber, along with other macro and micronutrients, and a rich culinary history. So as we just saw from the previous presentation, they also have a lot of positive health benefits. So we're excited to use pulses just based on the nutrition alone. But in addition to that, they can be differentiated compared to other ingredients that we use. They're non-GM, which is great. They're gluten-free. Gluten-free is a really big trend in the United States, so pulses are a fantastic ingredient for us to use as an alternative to wheat, for example. It's also not a top 8 allergen, which means we don't have to label it as such on our packages, and also that decreases plant complexity for us when we want to switch from something that's an allergen to a non-allergen. We have to do a lot of clean out. We wouldn't have to in the case with some of these pulses. And it's a great fit with several GMI brands, particularly because they're often naturally processed, and that's something that consumers are really looking for these days. Pulses are very cost-effective, and as a protein source, they can be lower cost versus other protein sources out there, for example, compared to whey. Pulses can be complementary with grains, so if we combine them in the right ratio, we can get a complete amino acid profile in the ingredient, and so that's very attractive to us as a grain-based company, that they pair very nicely with what we're already using. And then finally, the sustainability story with pulses is just excellent. Most major CPG companies now have a sustainability mission as part of their corporate profile, and I can tell you that pulses just fit really nicely into that. Having low water and low fertilizer requirements, really great story to tell with pulses. So all around, a very strategic ingredient. And then just to highlight the nutrition compared to some other grains, you can see that the protein content and the fiber content of lentils, split peas, and chickpeas really, blows rice and quinoa out of the water here. And, we hear a lot about quinoa. It's almost as if you put quinoa in your product today, people just flock to it. But I think that just speaks to the fact that, if there's a good marketing campaign around pulses, I think you guys will have future success with this category. This is a slide that just shows the low carbon footprint for pulses compared to other major protein sources. And I should say that I have a protein background, so I kind of skew my thinking towards protein when it comes to food ingredients. But again, a great story to tell for the environment and the future of food. So I'm happy to say that General Mills actually uses a lot of pulses today, and traditionally it's been a big part of our product line. So I just wanted to show you a few examples of that. So we have the Old El Paso line of Mexican foods, and Old El Paso refried beans would fit into this category. We have Progresso soup, lentil soup, for example, and also Cascadian Farms, which is a natural and organic brand that we also have, uses a lot of pulses. Green Giant vegetables, of course, both frozen and canned, and then Progresso beans would be another example of where we use a lot of pulses. I'm also happy to report that we're formulating new products with pulses. We're really proud of the Alt Bar, which is a high-protein Laura bar, essentially, and the protein provided into that bar, which is 10 grams, is from pea protein. We've just launched a new brand called Frolics, and part of that product line includes a chickpea snack that we're very excited about, and it's very delicious. Nirvana mentioned our Cheerios high-protein product. Thank you for that reference. We're very proud of that. We think it tastes great, and the inclusion in that product is made from soy and from lentil flour. And then we're also selling in some channels a red lentil pasta that just has one ingredient. That's the red lentil, and that's under the Udi's brand. So look for more pulse-containing food products from General Mills. We're working hard on that. So when it comes to our toolbox of pulse ingredients, this is what we're using, and I have a few comments here about what's working for us, what's not working for us type of thing. So we use whole peas, beans, and seeds, and primarily those are used in our canned and frozen products, and we're also beginning to use them in the snacks, as in the Frolics product that you just saw. We use the split seeds as an ingredient for many of the soups that we make, such as the Progresso lentil soup. We're using whole pulse flours. We're starting to use those in pasta and also in extruded snacks and cereals. And then I would say we're using a lot of the fractions as well, but mainly the protein fraction that's concentrated. And we're looking for concentrates, not so much isolates. We find that isolates on a label don't look that great to consumers. We do need concentrates, and by concentrate I mean an ingredient that has at least 80% or higher protein, maybe 60% could work as well. And the reason for that is when we're making a protein-fortified food that, say, has a 10 grams protein per serving claim, we need enough ingredients left over in the rest of the formula for the other things. So that means that the protein ingredient that we're adding has to be relatively concentrated. We know that pulse starch is available. I would say that we're not using it very much at all, and that's mostly because there's limited modifications available. In the cornstarch industry, for example, they acid modify, they hydrolyze, they chemically modify, and that's in order to make those starches more stable during processing. There's actually limited modifications available for pulse starch, which is why maybe we're not using as much as we could. So that's perhaps something that the pulse industry could work on. And then pulse fiber is also available. And by the way, starch and fiber, these fractions would be a byproduct of the protein concentration of pulses. The fiber we don't use a lot either. It's mostly insoluble, and it tends to be very expensive compared to the fibers that are currently on the market. We do have a Fiber One brand of cereal and bars, and we use an awful lot of fiber in that, but we require it to be soluble mostly, and that's for functionality reasons. So perhaps that's an opportunity for pulse fiber in the future. Okay. Product opportunities really cross the map here. We're very excited about ready-to-eat cereal, extruded cereal, gluten-free, grain-free, grain pulse combos, and high protein and fiber. So pulses can play in this area. In the snacks world, extruded snacks, chips, crackers, and bars have an opportunity here, and then in meals with soups, frozen vegetables, ethnic, global flavors, and pasta. So ingredient opportunities include whole flours and fractions, and other potential areas that we're really excited about to leverage pulses more in would include yogurt, bakery, and international products. Previous speakers talked about what consumers are looking for in terms of health benefits. I'm happy to say we're on trend with that too. We know that consumers are looking with ingredients in foods that help them with satiety and weight management, and pulses play a fantastic role, as we just heard from the previous speaker. And then there's a big free-from movement in the United States. Pulses are going to play a very important role there to develop gluten-free alternatives, low allergen products, non-genetically modified. They can be minimally processed, and they have a clean label. I'm going to skip over this. We're talking about protein-fortified food being a huge consumer trend. And why do we add protein to food? Well, for functionality purposes and for nutrition purposes. And when we do this, the functionality required by those ingredients can vary from very high on the functionality side to very low on the nutrition side. You almost want that ingredient to be invisible in a functional sense. Pulse ingredients can play a role in both of these areas, and I think it's been capitalized on the nutrition side, but I think there's a lot more that can be done on the functionality side. So what are those opportunities? Mentioned pulse protein as a protein fortificant. It's an alternative to soy protein, which people are looking for, and I mentioned the other benefits of being low allergen, naturally processed. Consumers are accepting, and it's a great fit for dairy, gluten, and soy-free products. There's a big opportunity, I think, for functional uses of pulse proteins as a natural emulsifier, for example. We're looking to replace virtually all of the chemical and synthetic additives that we use in food with nature-based versions, and I think pulses could have a good opportunity there. And then there's other technologies that could further transform your ingredients via enzymes, for example, and transform those fractions into new ingredients. So, for example, pea syrup, soluble fiber, and also pea protein fractions for specific technical applications. Just a note on technical challenges. I mentioned that we're a grain-based company. We really don't know a lot about pulses, even though we've been using them for a long time. We don't know what we need to know. We don't know what the critical attributes are for processing. We don't understand how these attributes vary by pulse type and ingredient fraction. And we don't even know what questions we should be asking our suppliers. We feel like the industry, especially for the pulse ingredient side, is in the early stages for the industry, and there's limited data on the impact of milling, particle size, starch damage, and protein damage on product application, and this is really important for us as food scientists to understand. And then flavor of pulses, U.S. consumer lack of familiarity. Pulses can be characterized by strong flavors, and in general we want more muted, less strong flavors. We don't understand the impact of variety of pulses on flavor and color, and off flavor is our most common limitation. So we need help on how to control that. So how do we process it so we can get rid of the off flavor? Can we use masking agents, which honestly we don't like to use very much. I'd rather see breeding for better flavor if that's an opportunity. I'm going to skip over this slide in the interest of time. I just wanted to speak really quickly about the challenges of the supply chain that we've encountered. I mentioned that we're a grain company and we have limited technical experience, but we see that suppliers seem fragmented and smaller. There can be a limited supply of some ingredients, such as pea protein or organic pea protein. And when we do a launch, a small launch might require 200,000 pounds of pea protein a year, but a large launch, such as with Cheerios, could require 2 million. And so we need to know that there are suppliers out there that can give us the volumes when we want them in those quantities. And then lastly, limited information on tech data sheets and what the critical specifications should be. I'm going to skip over this because we mentioned them. I just wanted to say the great news is that there are really great resources available for pulses for food manufacturers, and we rely on these. So I would say continue to fund these because this is where we get our main source of pulse information, and the information has been really great. So I just wanted to credit these associations with providing that information to us. And this is a picture of some of my colleagues from General Mills at the University of Saskatchewan, where we are looking at the availability of different types of lentils that they're studying up there. So in summary, I think pulse crops are strategic for the future and will play an increasingly important role in packaged food formulations and consumers' diets. There are technical challenges that exist, so more research is needed. Food processors, industry groups, universities, and suppliers can address the technical challenges by working together. And we should work together also to promote the positive benefits associated with growing and consuming pulses. And I just wanted to end with a cartoon here. So I think the goal is to move from the lower non-value-added mixed beans to go to the higher value-added add with assorted healthful pulses, because it's going to have a great impact on the environment. It's going to help our producers of pulses, and it's also going to provide the consumer with a more nutritious diet. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Erika. And I'll ask you to take a chair there. Erika, thank you very much for a great presentation. And I know that Tim McGreevy and I will probably want to come visit you and just see what you think about our new brand logo and how it might look on that Cheerios protein package and a few of the other products. So thank you for the great leadership, General Mills, and all the work that you're doing to further those interests. So I think we've had a great overview of the opportunities, the work that's going on, some of the challenges that we have, and now I think we want to kind of bring this full circle and talk about how this starts to come back and is relevant to some of you in the audience, the growers, and the whole value chain. So the last speaker for the panel is Murad Katib, who is the president and CEO of AGT Food and Ingredient. Murad I know very well because I've worked with him for the last more than 10 years. He is currently the president of the CSEA, and he is a past chair of the board of Pulse Canada. Murad has a bachelor's degree from Saskatchewan as well as an MBA from the Thunderbird School of Global Management in Nevada. And Murad, I'll ask you to join me on stage. And Murad's presentation is From Producer to the World. Murad, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So very interesting to kind of take a look at the presentations that we've had. So we've had a general market perspective. We've taken a look at some of the health benefits and the large body of work that's undergoing, and we've definitely had a perspective from a global leader in terms of the food side. So what I want to try and do is bring that back to our industry. Some of the trends that I see in terms of where we are today and where I think we need to be going. Now, many of you know already, but just AGT Food and Ingredients. A lot of you know us more from the operating companies that we operate around the world: Sascan, Arbel. We're a listed company on Toronto Exchange. and around 1.4 billion in revenue now, focused really on the pulse sector. And so we're going to talk a bit about the experience that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years in this whole pulse ingredient and the whole sector. So I want to just kind of set the stage to say, okay, we've talked about all these things, but where are we today in terms of the global agricultural sector? And you know, from a Canadian government document a number of years ago, they had a concept of what we call the rural renaissance, a future in which agriculture provides societal solutions to energy supplies, health promotion, and climate change. And whatever producers and processors do, it must be done in an innovative way that resonates with the consumer. You know, I found this to be a very profound kind of, you know, vision statement to, you know, have us all understand that, you know, this isn't only about farming anymore. It's not about, you know, being a trader or even a processor. This is a lot more in terms of how we touch, you know, a number of different sectors of the economy and a number of different issues, you know, as we go forward. So agriculture isn't just food anymore. Agriculture is not just hitting the breadbasket. You know, where I was born and raised, Saskatchewan, you know, we've always been kind of known as Saskatchewan, North Dakota, Montana. We're the breadbasket. We're wheat producers. Well, you know, I think that protein is actually a key driver of the agricultural market. And I think the opportunity exists for the pulse sector to actually claim to be the protein basket that the world is actually looking for, a solution where, you know, available protein sources. If we look at, you know, FAO data and we look at global population trends, we have, you know, growing population and incomes are rising. So when we look at that, you know, as incomes rise, disposable income rises and protein consumption goes up. Now, one of the things that we as, you know, a lot of us North Americans in particular, we have it all wrong. As protein consumption rises, we immediately assume more meat. I mean, the truth is people eat more protein. And the truth is they eat the proteins that they're more familiar with. And if we look at the world today, the emerging markets are consuming more protein with more disposable income, more vegetable proteins also being consumed, and then traditional, non-traditional markets like North America, we're all trying to consume a little less meat. So from that perspective, you know, you've got a dynamic where vegetable protein consumption is now touching the health sector. Energy. You know, why do I say energy? Well, you know, one thing I always remind everyone is we talk a lot about oil and gas, we talk about commodity prices, we talk about the boom of the world that happened, now is on a little bit of a hiatus for a few months. But protein is actually human energy. So when you want to talk about the basic building blocks of society, I mean, energy supply is a fundamental issue. Well, so is available nutrition and available protein as human energy. Environment, we talked about that. I'm going to talk a bit more about it to expand on what Erika said. You know, in Western Canada and North Dakota, immigration, we're driving, you know, skilled labor in to help to develop the agriculture sector. So the economy overall is benefiting, you know, in all of the regions where we operate our businesses. So when we look at those factors driving that global demand, we have the sustainable production systems, the requirements surrounding sustainable sources of protein. You know, that FAO report that I'd read, I don't remember exactly the date on it, you know, we had a scientist who actually used a basic, you know, to summarize his view. You want to meet the growing population trend of, you know, 2040, we need to create 3 billion vegetarians. Because when we look at the sustainability of the protein sources available today, we're not going to make it unless we create 3 billion vegetarians or the equivalent protein consumption that's going to come from vegetable protein. Now, one of the stats I like to throw in there is this middle-class spending. It'll increase in terms of numbers from 1.8 billion to 3.2 billion people by 2020 and 4.9 billion people by 2030. Of course, the driver of that is Asia. And when we look at middle-class spending, it's set to grow from $21 trillion to $56 trillion by 2030. Now, that's the sector I want to be in, is middle-class spending, the growth in disposable income. We're seeing it in China. We're seeing it in India. We're seeing it in emerging markets overall. So I think we're set for, you know, what I kind of term the telecommunications effect in food. And what I mean by that, let's say, you know, in India, years ago, there was 3-year waits to get a landline telephone. And a year later, everybody had a cell phone. And a year later, everybody had 2 cell phones. I still don't understand why everybody has 2 cell phones, but there were 2 instead of 1. So they skipped that trend of, you know, a long-term development of infrastructure. I think that the food industry is going to be seeing that in different emerging markets around the world, where, you know, the trends that are going very, you know, slowly, but they're picking up steam here, are going to go from not important to driving their markets. So we have to be prepared for that. Health and wellness. The consumer movement towards healthy lifestyles and non-traditional markets is a driver of this industry. I was talking to a processor the other day about North Dakota, eastern Montana. And with the new plant that we built in Minot, North Dakota, with the food ingredient processing, we're projecting that we will use around 250,000 tons of US peas in 2016. Well, that's changing the dynamic of the availability of peas in North Dakota, eastern Montana. So that's going to go into domestic milling, which is going to go into food ingredients and make Erika and others have available supply. And what that'll do is drive competition, and that will drive growth in the sector. And that will drive, ultimately, a sustainable opportunity for all of us to monetize the work that we've done to develop this sector. So the markets we all know. We know today, we've got a demand profile as an industry that's actually enviable. The emerging markets consume our products daily. We don't have to convince them to consume them. And the non-traditional markets are the ones that, you almost see the opposite effect in most markets, where the non-traditionals, North America, Western Europe, China. Who could have predicted that China would become, last year, Canada's largest pea market? It surpassed India for the first time. Why? As you all know, not pea consumption, starch extraction for vermicelli noodle production. So, there's a perfect example. Or I see the growing demand for Southeast Asian snack foods. The green pea, pea flours, faba beans, which is going to be a new crop where I think North America is going to take a very big step into dramatically changing the available supply profile of faba beans in the world. So we see these dynamics where, these new markets are driven by characteristics, the high protein, high fiber, nutrient dense, low fat, gluten-free, non-GMO, low allergenicity. I always say to people who aren't in the sector, I feel like I'm bragging. Who else can claim all of those things? And then, when we talk about the environmental side, low energy use, greenhouse gas, these are all things that you go, wow. When I'm now a steward of capital, I have to manage the capital that the public has entrusted in AGT as a public company. I love putting capital where I have so many different factors that are buoying my demand and my future, and not just one. Here we've got 12. If we move them in the right direction, it's a very intriguing business case. Now let's talk about the challenges, though. Complex supply chain. Many players optimizing their own performance without prioritizing the supply chain's performance. It's a multimodal business, right? This is not, moving unit trains of peas or lentils to the coast to go on a 50,000-ton Panamax vessel. We're talking about a sector that's changing dramatically. The availability of rail cars, trucks, containers, just-in-time inventory, distribution centers, an ability to feed just-in-time into, smaller production runs that are going to grow into larger production runs. I think Erika in our discussion will tell you, I don't think General Mills wants to keep large volumes of peas and lentils in their warehouses. So they're going to demand the industry to provide it when they need it for production runs. So from this perspective, production's on the rise, and we need to find ways to move products and markets that want them at the best possible price. Now, I love that last slide that Erika had with the cartoon, because that, to me, is the best. What we all want is we want to sell more, but we'd sure like to sell it at a better price, because everybody in the chain is going to have more, money to be able to divvy up in the thing. So I see pulses certainly as a solution to the growing protein challenge. More production or higher value. This is always a discussion for everybody in a sector. I think we want to do both, actually. But, when I look at, the need to increase quality and delivery of our end product, it's the same every time. One of the biggest challenges as an industry we're going to face is this is not a grade-driven system. I can tell you, when someone formulates, it has to be identical every time we provide the ingredient. So we're managing varieties, we're managing different organic factors from different geographic production regions within the same drawing area. We're managing, all of these things to be able to have exactly consistent, performance, so that the crunch is the same, the taste is the same, the texture is the same. So, we have to be ready to up our game. Pulse production competes as a low-cost protein. Why? On the other hand, as we up the value, we have an opportunity where I think that being a low-cost production system will give us an advantage as we go forward. So there's a great value proposition here, and I think that's the way we have to start thinking as an industry. Global production's rising, we know that. When we look at these commercialization issues, though, globally, we have a real opportunity to be a leader in the production, sale, use of ingredients derived from pulses. As an industry, we need to pull together and react. Agricultural products for export are becoming increasingly commoditized. You know, I sit down with a group of growers, I go, how many of you want to sell more peas? Every one of them puts their hand up. And I go, okay, simple solution, drop the price. Now, how many of you want to sell more peas? And it's funny, there's never another hand that goes up, right? So from that perspective, you know, the ability to take this industry, you know, collaboration approach to communicate these characteristics that are in line with what food companies and consumers want, that's what we need to do. We need to address the taste issue. Now, taste is one issue, but also the ability to use production technologies to deflavor or reduce the flavor profile without dramatically affecting the functionality of the product is another major challenge. You know, so somebody who produces now protein concentrates, how do we do the deflavoring without denaturing the protein? And when we do it, and then we still have to retest all the parameters along the way to figure out how they're reacting. Now, it'll be also interesting to see that as we start to introduce these modification processes in protein and starch and fiber, we're actually going to have to see how the effect is on the health outcomes. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out as well. Regulatory compliance. Let's realize one thing. The pulse industry for years has been very small, very fragmented. Companies have done their own business. Okay? Let's realize one thing, though. As sophistication increases, regulatory compliance must increase. We must comply with the laws. And if you're a small processor, don't tell us all to stay out of it because you're doing your business. This thing is bigger than any one processor. FDA approvals, Health Canada, labeling guidelines, standardization of these. These are all issues. Pet food, AFCO. We had to go through definitions because pulse definitions didn't exist for pet food. So these are all, you know, things that you have to turn around and look at. So product applications, you know, we've launched out this line of what we call Pulse Plus. So Pulse Plus ingredients are high viscosity pulse flours. That's our starch fraction. You know, actually our research is showing that the viscosity profile of those starch fractions of lentils and peas have a superior performance in certain applications than corn. So when we look at that viscosity index, that's why we call it V6000. Has a 6,000 minimum viscosity index compared to corn around 4,400. So these are the type of things that we're doing to try and brand them and look at the broad range of applications. Now, I also like the diversity of the applicability of the applications. So again, we're not just concentrated on snacks. We're not just concentrated on protein or on fiber. But realize one thing, that each one of these have different opportunities. Because, you know, with the opportunity to separate fractions and even to, you know, take pulse flours, and, you know, I think you use the term whole pulse flours, but a lot of what we're marketing now is actually dehulled pulse flours. So in a way, they're not actually whole pulses. We are removing the fiber fraction first to give a much more consistent particle size and you know, performance, and then allowing the food companies to add back the fiber in a natural fiber as they like to suit the application. So these are all kind of opportunities as we go forward. So what's the value proposition, though? You know, when I set up to build that plant in North Dakota, you know, I had to decide, what were we going to pitch? And, you know, what AGT pitched is, I think, what many of you are going to go through as you develop your businesses in this area. The one thing that I think we have to all understand is cost reduction is a major pressure in the industry. Okay, now cost reduction does not mean cheap. It's what you're competing against that you have to judge your ability to reduce cost. Let me give you an example. You know, our pea and our lentil and our faba bean proteins, big part of our projects in that area are aimed at allergen replacement, in particular in the egg applications. So, you know, the research and the application development we're doing in our partnership with Ingredion, so AGT and Ingredion, we signed a partnership for North America and Europe and Middle East, North Africa to develop applications and pulses focused specifically on allergen, cost reduction, and also the non-GMO side. Now, when you look at any one of these, again, think of it as a multi-dimensional opportunity. You know what, I'll tell you, I was sitting down with a very large international pasta manufacturer. And he said to me, you know, Murad, holy grail of pasta is to develop a high-protein, non-GMO, gluten-free pasta that tastes good, but I'm going to market it as pasta with high protein. I'm not going to market it as gluten-free, but I'm going to be able to put gluten-free on the label, and I'm going to appeal to that consumer base that matters to. But I think for our industry, just being gluten-free, you know, the narrowness of not recognizing this complete protein concept as well with cereals and pulse combinations do give a very limited scope in terms of the opportunity for growth as we go forward. I think you guys covered a lot of the other stuff. Oh, actually, yeah. So the new markets, I mean, it's leading to all kinds of, you know, things. And when we have, you know, the large name companies, you know, we have a number of, you know, niche kind of applications that have been done. But, you know, again, plug for Cheerios Protein, Barilla Plus pasta, you know, the formulation we did on Barilla Plus, you know, with lentils as the main ingredient in the legume semolina component of that, that's been a very successful product in the United States. So, you know, every box of Barilla Plus produced in North America, you know, is using actually U.S. and Canadian large green lentils or medium green lentils in a system. Curry is a Pepsi product. So we've got General Mills, we've got Barilla, we've got Pepsi, we've got Campbell's. You know, these are the kind of Sabra, of course, PepsiCo again. Then you have the regional companies. You know, the Mediterranean Snack Food Company, been very successful. I love the fact that I can go on Delta Airlines or United Airlines and buy the snack box, and there's lentil chips and there's hummus in it today. So these are things that are telling us we're making it work. So pulses are changing the category. I mean, you know, when we look at this connection between natural, non-GMO, and the consumer's taste and preference, you know, the category is changing. 10 years ago when I started AGT, everybody said non-GMO in the US, so I'll introduce you to my colleague in Europe. You can talk about it there. Because us Americans, except for a few, you know, California folks and a few PNW, you know, environmentalists, nobody cares. And certainly nobody's going to be willing to pay for it. Well, I think that's changing. And what's changing is, it's the demographic, it's the millennials that will change the category. So my daughter, I have twins, 13 years old. My son, he's a boy, he cares about football, girls, and whatever. My daughter cares about the environment. And my daughter is the target demographic. So when I look at the environmental awareness of the 13-year-olds today, 10 years from now, the food companies have to be prepared for that. So we're increased use of pulses is in all categories. We've got all these opportunities, and pulses do enhance everyday foods. I mean, when we look at formulations of common products, we can demonstrate all kinds of opportunities there. The sustainable agriculture side we talked about already, but you know, why I care is because the food companies care and the retailers are driving us to care. They're preparing for the fact of the millennial demand that will come 10 and 15 years from now. And corporate social responsibility, CSR statements, are also going to drive this. So we're not going to sell product because we have it, but it's one more attribute. So we take the profile that we have. I call this the eyebrow test. I love to go to a food company who's not familiar with pulses and put that slide up and watch them when they see lentils at 0.9 and beef and lamb at 27 and 36. So the eyebrow test is I like to see how the eyebrow goes up when they see that particular slide. So it's a race. The question is, you know, are we ready for the global race to protein and the changing sector? And, you know, I think that we have actually started to react. We're in the early stages, but, you know, I think we're actually just touching the tip of the iceberg. And so, you know, from that perspective, I think that, you know, we're certainly well positioned to enter this global race for protein, and the pulse industry is uniquely positioned. Now, IOP, Gordon, I know I'm done, but I just got to spend 1 minute on that, and I won't answer one question maybe. IOP is a generational opportunity for this industry. Okay, let's be honest. Even if we all live another 40 years, we're not going to see another International Year of Pulses declared by the General Assembly of the United Nations. And we should, in fact, take the quinoa example and understand what that International Year of Quinoa did to that crop and the demand profile. Now, I love the fact that we're not a microclimate production crop that's limited by how much available supply there is. That'll be a limiting factor for quinoa. For us, we got a whole bunch of different dynamics. So many of you are aware that AGT made a $500,000 commitment to kickstart the IOP initiative for the Global Pulses Confederation and Pulse Canada program. It was a big decision for us. I mean, even though it's our industry, $500,000 is a lot of money, but we believe in it, and we challenge all of you to believe in it, to recognize that what we're building is actually our future. So this opportunity is going to get the message out, food companies to embrace it, and we're going to grow consumption. So that's all I have to say.
This is Emin from Emin Akkan from Yield Agribusiness, the MCC. I would like to ask my question to Nirvana. What is the chance of a traditional local pulses recipe to get global, like pasta, for example?
I definitely do. Just looking at how, and the General Mills example was great, of how manufacturers are looking to global markets to expand their businesses. If they see that a product is very successful in the US, so if their high protein pasta is being very successful, they're going to try to lift and shift that. So lift and shift means just take the product that they have, very successful in one market, study the global international markets that they want to focus on, and see how they can tweak the product in certain ways or tweak the communication to make that product successful there. So I definitely see a lot of potential for that.
Hi, I'm Dee Richmond from I represent the Dry Pea and Lentil Council in Bangkok, Thailand, and we represent them in Southeast Asia. And I'd like to ask Erika and Murad this question. We've been doing a lot of work on promoting pulses in value-added food products, the pea flours, that type of thing. One of the questions that we've been getting a lot lately is the health consciousness or the willingness for consumers to pay more for foods that offer health benefits is not so high in Southeast Asia as it is in the United States. They're much more price conscious in their ingredient purchases. And the question that we're getting a lot is, what other functional benefits do you see pulse ingredients adding to food products other than the health benefits? What other things should we be promoting and talking about?
Erika, let's start with you and then get Murad to comment as well.
Well, one example that I tried to bring out in the presentation is to think of the fractions in a slightly different way. So while you might be thinking pea protein is a fortificant to increase the grams of protein per serving, it's an interesting emulsifier in small quantities. So where you might use something like lecithin that's derived from soy, pea protein can be a very nice alternative, and it's clean label and it's more affordable than I think you would think it would be once you do the cost and use calculations. So it's think beyond the traditional use for some of these fractions.
I think one of the things you're going to see is in markets that are more traditionally price conscious, you know, the effect of, as I said, the speed at which they're going to advance, I think you're going to see pick up. So from that perspective, in terms of importance to the consumer, you know, I think that ultimately the way we're approaching those markets is to market the nutritional benefits, but also, again, the functionality. If I look at our marketing on the flour side, you know, we're focusing a lot on the high viscosity flour starch fractions, which of course in the snack food industry give us a very consistent crunch type application. I think that companies have to, you have to start to promote this. Look, your consumer base is going to evolve, and I think that the leading food companies are recognizing that, even in emerging markets where that consumer taste and preference. And if we look at the other Asian markets that are maybe more mature, let's say Japan, I mean the focuses are changing where as the population's aging, there is more of a health conscious type marketing side that goes. So I'd encourage you to start to have them think about this changing demographic, the growing income levels in their middle class. I think they'll come to the answer and understand the importance.
Just before we come to this question, John, do you have anything to add to this in terms of, you talked a little bit about this growing pandemic, the triple threat. What would your response be to this question?
Well, I have a couple thoughts. I mean, I think one, and speaking with a lot of friends in the food industry, I think you have to be careful identifying products specifically for people with diabetes or heart disease, because then that stigmatizes them, or they feel stigmatized, and someone doesn't want to buy it because they don't want to be associated with that. I think you have to really push the general health benefits, and sometimes it's about sustained energy, feeling better, and then have some of those other risk factor modifications as maybe part of that communication, but not specifically, I don't think, targeted for a specific disease group. The other thing I was going to say is I think that as we're moving forward and the guidelines, there's a big opportunity right now because we're moving more towards food-based and dietary pattern-based approaches. We're getting away from that macronutrient, micronutrient-centric view of disease where it's just about the carb, the fat, and the protein, or just about specific micronutrients, and it's about the whole foods now and how those fit into a complex dietary pattern to actually give benefit. So I think that there's an opportunity to try to market, I think, pulses within traditional diets, and that was discussed, and within healthy dietary patterns. And that's come to the fore in particular in the United States because the Dietary Guidelines for Americans Committee just issued their report in March, where they now talk about vegetarian dietary patterns and Mediterranean dietary patterns. Now that going forward means that they're going to have to redesign their food pyramids. That actually affects food policy and then what kids get taught in school. And I think there's a great opportunity with Year of the Pulse and the things to really make people realize that pulses are a very important part of a vegetarian diet, a very important part of Mediterranean diet, and these other healthy dietary patterns.
Nirvana, I'm going to put you on the spot and say, do you have any observations on this question? Because you've looked at new product launches, what's trending. Companies are going to be looking at what consumers are interested in. Do you have a response to the question specific to that part of the world, and what messages perhaps we could be talking about as the pulse industry?
Definitely. I mean, I think for us, we do a lot of custom consumer research, so we could see perhaps functional nutritional claims aren't necessarily resonating. What are the claims that people care about, and trying to identify what those are and seeing where pulses fit in. So it's almost reverse engineering. So you might be able to find that perhaps ecological concerns are of more importance, or sustainability. Something like that is something where pulses would really fit nicely. So it's all about finding out what consumers do care about, what they are passionate about and willing to put their money towards, and then engineering products using ingredients and finding, what can pulses bring to the table to resonate with that.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to a question over in this side of the room.
Okay, thanks. My name's Lee Moats. I'm a lentil farmer from Saskatchewan, and my question is for you, Dr. John, to do with the kind of exciting information that you presented on improvements in health relative to consumption of lentils. And having proof is one thing, but public policymakers also respond to the issues that are front and center to them, and cost is one of those. So in your research or your thoughts on it, what is the cost potential savings relative to dietary change, and do you speculate that could be a good way of motivating public policy towards changing dietary habits?
So what I would say is, I think we have to recognize in nutrition, we're poor cousins in epidemiology. Individual foods have very small effects, and you need to put them together. So I think it's, again, this pairing with other foods to form a healthy dietary pattern that's going to be, I think, part of the key. And that fits then with the Canada's Food Guide, or public policy around the communication around lentils, and for that matter, other pulses. Beyond that, I think, though, there's a great opportunity, I know that we're pursuing in Canada, to actually pursue health claims, too. It could be argued that, will that resonate or not with the consumer, but I think, getting the regulatory framework working for pulses by actually getting some health claims, I think would be useful. And part of it is actually, I mean, I'm a bit biased here, in funding more clinically meaningful research, you put it on the agenda of the consumer, you put it on the agenda of the clinicians and scientists and people working in the area, and then you put it on the agenda of the policymakers as well. So I think that's a great way to market or increase visibility, is through really high quality research showing clinically meaningful benefits. So actually, at the end, where people really care about.
My name is Chandrasekhar. I'm from India. I have one observation and one question addressed to MINTEL Nirvana. Your presentation was wonderful. You showed a number of percentages of growth in product launches across the world. Very interesting, but percentages are impressive, but they're also sometimes deceptive because of possibly base effect. If you can quantify those numbers, it would have been a lot more specific in terms of increase in consumption. But that's only an observation. But my question really is, you talked about macro drivers of consumption growth. What, according to you, are the risks or the risk factors that can potentially impact consumption growth in future? And this question, possibly even Murad can think about and answer. I'll be very, very interested in knowing his mind. But what are the risk factors that you see in future consumption growth in pulses? Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to have a quick answer on this one. The clock is ticking down and lunch is waiting. So quick response, please.
Okay, I definitely don't want to stand in between you guys and lunch. Thank you for the question. Definitely, I think for pulses, and especially in Western markets, and I can obviously speak more authoritarianly on Western markets because that's where I grew up and what I'm exposed to. But I do think there's a perception that pulses take longer to make, that they're part of maybe some of these more ethnic dishes that, honestly, if you look at millennials, the growing demographic in terms of purchasing power, they're not very comfortable in the kitchen. They're not very, they're interested in cooking, but the skills are a little bit low, I would say. But I do think their interest will get them to consuming pulses as long as pulses can meet them kind of halfway in terms of offering convenience. So the biggest risk factor I see is just pulses kind of dropping out of the conversation and not being as relevant, especially in terms of ethnic cuisine. But if they can position themselves as easy to make, great tasting, and bringing more excitement to what millennials are already eating and what they're already seeking, I think that's a good way to mitigate those risks.
Single biggest risk is we would become our own enemy and not understand the challenge and the opportunity and react as an industry. I mean, that's the single biggest risk, that we get stuck in the fact that we're marketing commodity today. This opportunity is here. It'll be here for the next 3 to 5 years. If we do it right, we'll become a food of the future. So that's what we need to do. That's our risk.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our panelists for a great presentation.